Hey viewers, my name is Cara. This video is going to be about something that I brought up on my Instagram a while ago when I first started it. So, sometime last year, in 2018. And I intended to post about it on Instagram again when I finished it up, but I didn't get around to it. But it's been done for a while. And I've been having, as usual, technology issues with getting videos up this month. Not the least of which is the fact that my video for Pagan Perspective this week still did not ever get made public because I had to edit it a little bit, so I used the YouTube Studio editor because I just really, it was almost perfect. I just needed to cut out a few different things, and I was tired of re-recording it a million times to get it done in one take because I can't edit like I normally do, and so I was like, I'm just going to use the YouTube editor just to cut out this few minutes worth of stuff and it'll be fine. It took me about 2 hours just to get those edits done because it's a lot harder to use than what I'm used to, and also I have a miniature laptop that I use for just like general internet use, typing out things and stuff like that. And so like the screen is too small, like the studio thing is bigger and it doesn't shrink to fit my screen, so I had to like scroll over and scroll up and down, and it just took forever. But 24 hours later, the video was still not processed. The changes had still not been processed and saved, so I couldn't get my video up in time to be up before the Wednesday collab video, so it's just not up yet. I mean, it's still there, and hopefully it's processed. I haven't even bothered checking it in the last 2 days because I'm just going to have to post it later or pull it and put it on this channel. But meanwhile, I've been trying to record videos for this channel and having issues with that as well, and things just taking way too long, or I'm being really extra rambly for some reason. So I've been trying to think of what's something quick that I can talk about. And so I thought of doing this thing. And I did try recording this once already a few days ago, and it was also a 40-minute video, so I'm gonna try to just keep it shorter. Like 20 minutes is a long video, but it's okay. 30 minutes is like alright, but even 40 minutes I'm like, that's a lot, that's just a lot, and I've been doing a lot of those, so I'm trying to bring it down. So this is something that I think is really interesting, which I guess a couple other people also found really interesting because when I posted about it on Instagram, people said so. So some of you will find this really interesting. Some of you might think this is really fucking boring, and that's fine. A lot of people think that they're not interesting, and like even my friends in real life are always like, no, I like just listening to you talk, Cara, because you're so interesting and you've got so many interesting things going on in your life and nothing is interesting in my life. I'm here to tell you that's crap. That's not true. There are interesting things going on in your life. The only reason that you all think I have interesting things going on in my life is because I find them interesting and I bring them to you and say, hey, I think this is interesting. And so therefore, I act like my life is interesting, therefore it is. So that's all you have to do. Just take an interest in your own life and what's going on. And if you think it's interesting, I guarantee someone else out there will think it's interesting. If not me, myself, and I. So, without further ado, this is about, which you already know from the title of the video, and you've been like, why is it taking 4 minutes to get to it? This video is about tracking my journal entries. This is a thing that I did because I'm crazy and a nerd, and I like note-taking, and I like organization, which is why I'm a fairly decent stage manager when I actually get around to doing it. So I'm just going to show you the first page and talk you through it. There's 3 pages. Here we go. This is what it looks like. So if you have watched my video from last year of what's in my journals, and I was sharing my spiritual slash witchy journals and books that I keep, you will know that I keep several different types of notebooks, or at least I did, and now I'm kind of consolidating them. So I have the mirror books, which are the spiral bound notebooks that I use just for like general journaling about my path and my life. So it's any sort of any sort of reflections about my path. That's what a mirror book is. That's what the name comes from. I believe that term came from Scott Cunningham. I believe that's where I got it all those years ago. So I have those, and I am on my 4th volume of those now. So I just use them up until they're done and then start a new one, and I call that volume 2 and volume 3. So I'm on volume 4, and I also had, back when I started this, so I started tracking from the first mirror book. I definitely had journals and things that I took notes in way earlier in my path, like from 2003 on. This starts in 2011 though, because it's when my first mirror book, like formally thing that I call a mirror book, began. So this is 2011, 2012, and 2013. I've got the months of the year here in the rows, and then I divided my college-ruled giant notebook paper sheets into 30 columns for the 30 days of most months, because it was easiest to divide it into 6 sections and then those sections into 5 days each. And I figured out, you know, it took me some time to figure that out, but then I knew how big each section was, and I just used a ruler and put dots and then drew the vertical lines. So, I mean, if you have graph paper, you can skip this step, but I did it by hand, and then any of the months that would have 31 days, it would just be outside the column. But as you can see here, there was nothing on a 31st of any month for these 3 years. So there's that. But that's how I set it up, and then I have color coding, depending on the notebook being talked about. So when this started, the blue is the regular mirror book entries. The pink with the R in it, which you can't really see super well, there you go. Pink with the R is my ritual notebook, and the purple S is my shadow work notebook. So my ritual notebook was a little notebook that I would take notes, or I would write a journal entry specifically about any time that I did a ritual, like a formal ritual, what I considered it. So you can see I did a lot of those in 2012, which is was my senior year of college in undergrad, and when I went to England, when I then graduated and started really delving into my path more deeply. So you can see I did a lot of formal like ritual and noted it in my ritual notebook there, and a lot of shadow work. Not as many entries in my actual mirror book, none at all it looks like in 2012, except maybe this one that was blue and then got colored over with purple. Because the other thing I was noting was the difference between just like a general journal entry and when I made an entry just to record a tarot or oracle card reading. Because sometimes if I do a reading and I want to keep track of it, I would put it in my books as a journal entry so that I remember it. For a while I was doing that in my mirror books, and then I started not doing as many formalized rituals anymore, to where I felt like that really deserved its own notebook. So the ritual notebook became kind of where I put my tarot stuff. Now I have a totally different notebook, left over from college actually. It's the remainder of a composition notebook where I take all my tarot study notes. Like when I read a new book about tarot, I take notes on the book in it and like any new things about it. And then I just keep notes of tarot readings in there sometimes. So it really depends. It's kind of all over the place. So if you ever decide to do something like this, it'll be unique to you, obviously. But I have a little key up here in the corner. So like blue was for the general mirror book entries. A T is for tarot or oracle readings, because R was for ritual. So not to be confused with readings. I just used a T for tarot, and then S for the shadow work notebook. And I used purple for the shadow work notebook tracking because I always use purple ink in my shadow work notebook. That's just a thing that I do with my shadow work. So then down here in 2013, we see a big ol' line of green, And that is because that is when I went to, or no, excuse me, before I went to Witch Camp, I worked through 12 Wild Swans, which is a book by Starhawk and Hilary Valentine, which was written to be like a workbook version of attending a witch camp. So it's written out with an elements path, an inner path, and an outer path exercises for each chapter of the story, and it goes through the story, The 12 Wild Swans, which just happened to be the story that they picked for the theme of the book, but witch camps and other workshops and things use all different types of stories. So before I went to witch camp, I worked through the book, and I chose to do it in the way that I worked through the whole book, just looking at the elements path exercises for 1 week, and then I went back to the beginning and worked on the inner path for 1 week, and then started over and worked on the outer path exercises for the 3rd week. And those are in green because I took those notes in a separate notebook. Then, so you can see there's not a whole lot actually in my journals in 2011 to 2013, except for my daily work when I started doing 12 Wild Swans. Everything else is kind of haphazard. Again, I seemed to do a lot of ritual in 2012 for whatever reason, but I am by no means an every single day journaler, as you can see. Then, moving into 2014, and then notes all the way up through 2018, here's what we have. I'm crazy. All right, so 2014, I have little notes in the margins here. I finished mirror book number 1, the spiral notebook that I was using at the time, and I switched to another one, so I switched colors. I actually started using the notebook that I had done my 12 Wild Swans notes in as my second volume of my mirror book, so I continued with a base color of green for my general mirror book journal entries. So that's why you see a whole bunch more green. So really after 2013, so starting with 2014, you start to see a lot more journal entries. Still not every day, still not every week, but I start to have a lot more to say to myself in my journals, and just small spatterings of using those other notebooks. Mostly at this point, everything is in my mirror books. And yeah, lots of reclaiming specific stuff, including here, this big bar here that's actually daily is when I went to witch camp in 2015. So there's that. 2017 and 2018, I was also using a miniature little tiny notebook that I got at the dollar store because I started keeping a specific gratitude/manifestation journal, which I also talked about in my What's in My Journals video. And it has a neon blue edging around the pages, so I used blue ink to record it. But because sometimes I would do entries in multiple notebooks on the same day, so this was the thing about, like, if I had multiple notebooks for different types of things, but I actually needed to talk about all of them on the same day, I would end up writing about it in 3 notebooks. So trying to do away with that. But for example, if I had a regular journal entry in a mirror book, but then I was also doing my gratitude list for the day, okay, cool. How could I put that on here in a way that I can see both clearly? So I just started doing little stars in the corner of the spaces for the gratitude journal. So that's what those little, you can't even tell it's a star probably, there you go. And as you can see, anytime that I noted the moon phase in my journal entry, I also included it here. I always begin a journal entry with the full date, day, month, and year, the day of the week, a little drawn picture like that of the current moon phase and then the approximate time of day that I'm starting the entry. And then any other pertinent information, like if it's the summer solstice, if it's someone's birthday, if it's another type of holiday, secular or a national holiday, or anything else like that that I want to note. I'll put that up in the heading of my journals as well. But I didn't do that as much all the time in the beginning because, as you can see here on the first page again, I don't always have the little picture of the moon phase with them, and that's because I didn't always note it in my journals back then. I was mostly only noting it when it was a full moon or a dark moon or a first or last quarter, and there's a couple times in here where I like remembered to look up what the moon phase was and put it in. But you can see I didn't get consistent about that until later. So, looks like I really started doing that pretty much all the time in 2015, which is crazy for me to think. So that's one of the things that I learned by looking at this is like, I feel like, oh yeah, I always do that and I've always done that. But looking back at this, I can see like, well, no, the little moons didn't really start showing up until really consistently until 2015. And before that, they were just kind of sometimes there, sometimes not. I don't know. Other things that I really learned about myself by doing this, well, one, obviously, like, I already knew that I am not an every single day person. But for example, like, I am really proud that when I started my gratitude journal and manifestation journal, which is not the first time I've ever done a gratitude journal, by the way, but this specific one, I was really proud that I actually did do it every single day for a month. And then I just dropped off for like a week, but then I did it again for like 4 days in a row, and then not for a few days, and then again for a couple days. And after that, it's just here and there. And actually, I started writing poetry in that notebook after that because I was carrying it around in my bag. So sometimes I'd be somewhere, like waiting for something, and I would just pull out my notebook and start writing poetry in it. So I actually wrote, in the blue ink, that means it was that notebook, like here and here and here, it just says poem in blue, and that's to say that it was in that little gratitude journal, but it was a poem, not actual notes about gratitude and what I've manifested in my life that day or whatever. But anyway, I'm realizing now that I forgot to tell you why I did this. So it just kind of seems like, because you're fucking crazy, like, because why not? So I actually started doing this because I had noticed when flipping through my journals, or like when I'd go to make an entry, I was noticing things like, wow, I seem to come make a journal entry on or around the 15th of the month quite often. I wonder if that's a bigger pattern that I would be able to observe that has been true of me over a number of years. Like, I wonder if that's just one of my personal cycles that I've never really consciously noticed before, but when I'm flipping through my journals, I'm seeing the date 15 or 14 a lot, and I'm like, I wonder if that's something I've always done. Like, I seem to feel called to journal about my practice in the middle of the week, and even right now as I'm recording this video, it's the 15th. Like, personal tides are a concept and a challenge, actually, that Annie, Mirth and Reverence, who used to be on Pagan Perspective with us, challenged me about, challenged me to discover about myself in somewhere around 2011 or 2012. I asked several people to give me challenges, and it was around the time that I was working on the 12 Wild Swans, because it's a concept that I learned kind of from that and from spiral dance. It was in 2013 is when I was working through the book, so maybe it was around then. Gosh, it's been even longer than I thought. Anyway, I asked people for challenges, and the one I got from Annie was about determining my personal tides, my personal cycles, and what kind of landmarks throughout my personal cycles are important to me. So for me, that meant like discovering, are the typical traditional 8 Sabbats that we think of as the Celtic wheel of the year that a lot of Wiccan-based practitioners follow, are those Sabbats really all personally important to me? Or is it more just the minor Sabbats or more the major Sabbats? You know, what is it? Is the full moon really important to me? Is the dark moon really important to me? Is the quarter moon really important to me? Whatever the case may be, find out what my personal cycles are and then follow them. So that's something that I would not say I have completed or totally accomplished, but it's something that I've been thinking about for evidently even more years than I thought, looking back at this, which is another reason that I love journaling. Not just tracking the journals, but like just the first step of journaling in the first place, because I can look back and see, like, when was that thing that I was doing? And I find it in my journals and like, oh my gosh, wow, that was 2013. I thought it was like, you know, a couple years ago. So time, the concept of time is absolutely crazy to me. Time is a construct. I totally believe that. It's not linear. I am so horrible at judging how much time has really passed because it doesn't feel like that to me. So I like journaling for that reason. It helps me ground myself in the constructed reality of numbers and calendars and things and knowing how long ago something really was. If that makes sense. So what I actually learned from this process, and again, I'm not saying, like, if you journal, you should definitely do this. You don't have to do this. I understand, like, this takes a lot of time and is not something that everybody would like to do, but it's the kind of thing that I like to do. And I learned some things. So not only is there not really a specifically strong connection about the 15th, but for example, here in 2014, 2015, I did have several entries on the 15th, so it's this column here. So there's that one, that one, that one with 14th and 15th, 14th, 15th, 13th, 15th, 14th, 14th, and 15th. You know, so yeah, for a while, there were a lot that were right around the middle of the month, which I just thought was kind of interesting. Something else that I noticed that I had never picked up on until I did this process is that I also journaled a lot on the 4th of the month. So like here we have the 3rd, 4th, 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 5th, 4th, 4th. No, that was the 3rd. Sorry. 3rd, 1st and the 4th, 4th, 5th. So that was interesting. I had never picked up on that before. And then continuing into 2017, we have the 2nd, the 1st and the 2nd. Oh, the 4th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 1st, 4th, 1st, 5th, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and then the 6th, skipping the 5th. You know, so it's like interesting. I had never really noticed that for a while I was journaling a lot at the beginning of the month. The only thing that stuck out to me was the middle of the month. Something else, probably the biggest thing that I noticed with this, and something that I didn't mention before in my color coding, because it was not an original thing that I planned on tracking. You can see here in 2015, let me go over here. So you can see here in 2015, let me have you look at just this so that I can still see it. You see this little, if you already looked in the margin, then you know, spoilers. You'll see this little red D in here, and then you see a little red corner on some things from here on out. You can barely see it, but it's there. Sometimes it's just a little partial red in a corner. So what that is is that in 2015 was the first time that I started mentioning my issues with depression in my personal notebooks and journals. The reason that I thought that was weird and that I learned something about myself doing this is because my depression did not start in 2015. My issues with anxiety and depression started in around, see, now because I'm not looking at an exact like journal entry or something, it's hard for me to remember back. I have to like do backwards math. But it started during college. So it was around 2011, actually, because I know my trip to New York was in 2010, and it was after that. So it was around 2011 and then 2012 when it sort of increased. But in my last couple years of college is when my issues with anxiety and depression started, and when I was regularly seeing a counselor on campus for those issues. So when I got to 2015 and I started tracking and I saw entries that were about my depression, I thought, wait a second. I'm like, have I not noticed any of those before? Wait, what? And I literally like went back in the notebooks to the beginning of the stuff that I had already tracked to see like where else did I talk about this, and I didn't. So I was blown away, honestly, by the fact that I didn't start talking about my issues with that type of stuff in my own journals, my own personal, private journals. Like, nobody else reads these things. They're just for me. Until 2015. So until I had already been dealing with it for like 3 or 4 years, I didn't even write about it like to myself. That seems weird to me. And it also stuck out a lot because after that point, like especially in 2017, 2018, there's a bunch of little red corners on things because I talk about it all the time now. I talk about it freely and openly, and I mention it a lot. I've mentioned it on my channel so that people are aware. I talk about it on Instagram occasionally. I'm not like constantly talking about it, but it's a thing that I've been dealing with for quite a while now. So I just think of it as like, yeah, it's just part of my life. I talk about it when it comes up, whatever. But apparently I didn't always write about it. So that is something that I learned that I really didn't expect to learn doing this process. And then just one more little interesting thing here. We're coming in right around 30 minutes, which I think is okay. One little other thing that I noticed is that I tend to, when I get away from my shadow work stuff for long, long periods of time, I tend to come back to it always in October. And this one was especially interesting because this one here, it was October 20th. I put a little note in the margin over here. This was exactly 1 year after my previous entry in my shadow work notebook. So the last time I had done work in my shadow work notebook was October 20th of 2016. And then on October 20th of 2017, I picked it up and went to do it and realized, oh my gosh, my last entry was a year ago today. So that was weird to me, so I noted it, and then sure enough, looking back, 2016, we have that October 20th and also a couple other days that October, but then like nothing else the whole year except early on in January, and like nothing, and then is when I began it. So after I initially began it and was trying to work on it all the time, I pretty much didn't work on it at all throughout the years, but then every October picked it back up. And it wasn't like I was sitting there looking at my calendar like, oh, it's October, time to do the shadow work. No, it's just I was drawn to doing that work again that I specifically had going on in that notebook in October. And that's not to say that I never did shadow work any other time of the year, because that is something that is part of a lot of the other things that I do, but I'm talking about like the specific work that I had going on with that notebook and what I was journaling about in that. I would go back to wanting to journal about my progress with it in October. So that was interesting. If you are someone who likes taking notes and being ridiculously organizational, then you might want to do something like this, especially if you're already journaling. If you're not already journaling about your practice, I recommend it, but I'm saying that knowing that some people just really hate writing. Some people just really feel like they don't have anything to say. And there's a million different types of things you could be tracking. I mean, if you're someone who does a daily card pull, if you're into tarot or oracle decks or whatever, you could just write that down every day. Or you can do the gratitude journaling thing where you just, even if you limit it to 5 things, like write down 5 things that you're grateful for that happened that day, like if you do it at the end of the day. Or whatever. There have been some periods of time where I was having a lot of really intense, highly symbolic dreams. Excuse me. So I would just, for like a period of a week at a time when I'm having a lot of crazy dreams, I would be journaling all the time about my dreams. Sometimes it's just like, oh, this crazy thing happened to me that was very synchronistic and reminded me of something that I've been working on. Whatever. And as you can see, I don't do it every day. There's a bunch of blank space in here. I'm not an everyday journaler, but I would consider myself a big journaler. So it doesn't have to be every day to actually be a big part of your practice and be something that really helps you. And even if just for the fact that you're expressing it on paper and then that's it. But then if you're like me, every few years you look back through things, you try to remember, when did this happen? Or like, what did I used to think about this when I started working on it versus now that I've been working on it for about 3 years? Compare and contrast. All that wonderful, juicy kind of inner work of like what's going on with me inside my mind and my heart and my soul and my spirituality. Like, I think that's super cool. And if you didn't know exactly how crazy I am, I also did something like this for Pagan Perspective, because before we were bringing in new substitute hosts, which we have now on the Pagan Perspective, I wanted to catch up on knowing how out of line we had all gotten in the previous 3 years when my life got absolutely crazy and I wasn't watching everything that we were all doing. So, like, we all knew, like, yeah, I've missed some videos here and there. I've definitely missed some videos. But I don't think any of us really had a concept of, like, seeing those 3 years in one place. So I was already working on tracking my journals, so I decided to track the videos. So this is the Pagan Perspective videos from 2016. All those red X's are the ones that we totally missed. The black boxes are when we did not have a substitute host for those days, like assigned. The yellow ones are subs videos that were missed. 2017, similar, lots of red. Also lots of grayed out boxes where we did not have substitute hosts assigned to those days, which is, again, why we just did auditions and got new substitute hosts, so we have a full team again. And then this was 2018. I arranged it slightly differently so that I would have room at the bottom to do the notes instead of doing it on the backs of the other pages. So, you know, me, whatevs. This is the kind of stuff that I do at home, spending time figuring out my life and my channels and all my various projects that I have going on. So I hope you found this video entertaining, at least good background noise while you're doing something else, if not actually interesting. If you are a journaler, try it out. You know, you might find some interesting patterns or non-patterns that you weren't expecting to learn about yourself, not just by doing the journaling in the first place, but then by looking at the patterns of when you wrote things and what you were writing about at different times of the year, different times of your life, how it corresponds with other things that were going on. Like the year I graduated from college, my journal entries just exploded, you know, like that makes sense to me. I expect to see something like that. Lots of other things that maybe I didn't expect. All right, this video is almost the same length as the other one, but I feel better about it. I feel like it was more cohesive. It made more sense. Yeah, cool. So apparently 40-minute videos are just what you're gonna get from now on from me until I start editing again. I don't know, just as I get older on YouTube, I just have more to say, and I feel like you're just gonna watch it. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and tell me about your journaling habits in the comments or in a video response if you want to make a video about it. Cool. Here's a topic idea for you. And goodbye.